God spends a lot of time in the Bible telling us who we are. He must have known that we would doubt who that is, and that we would spend our lives searching for our identity. It was like he knew that there would be many moments and events in our lives that we would allow to define us and write on the script of who we are. My name is Lesley DeBono, and this is my story. The first few years of my life, my dad was in and out of jail for drugs, domestic violence, and assaults. Some of my earliest memories were of substance-induced fights. I tried to make myself small and as unnoticed as I possibly could. By the age of 4, my mom had divorced and remarried. She met a Christian traveling evangelist. Instantly thought that he must be different because he's Christian and it's different than what she had been living in. At first, he showered me with affection and gifts and finally thought that I had a daddy that loved me. From the ages of 5 to 8, I was homeschooled to protect against other people seeing that I was being abused. My days would be spent for hours just standing in a corner, staring at the wall. I was terrified to move an inch in fear that I would be beaten. Anytime that people would begin to show concern, would begin to notice that something was off in our family, we would pack up whatever we could in the middle of the night, leave everything behind, and move to another town. I was fearful of this God that they talked about. There was no grace that was taught. My childhood was just filled with sadness and loneliness, and I felt completely unwanted and unloved. I didn't know who God was because the God that I had been shown was a monster. When we have been left by loved ones, abandoned by those we trust, and we hear the name unworthy. When we have opened our hearts to love, only to have that love trampled on, and we hear the name rejected. By the time I was 15, my mom was on her 5th marriage. What little bit of my heart that had been open to God, I began to harden my heart. Wanted nothing to do with him. I had suffered so much pain and abuse by this point that I couldn't trust a God that would allow such horrific and vile things to happen to a child. Nearly every father figure in my life to that point had used or abused me in some way and stripped away every bit of innocence that I had. Yeah, I was extremely angry at men. I did not trust men at all. But even in that, I was so desperate for a dad that I kept putting my heart out there. I kept trusting every new relationship that my mom drug us through because I just wanted somebody to love me. I saw other people they seemed happy, they had parents that loved them, and I desperately wanted it. I really desperately wanted a family, but my world was kept really small. When we reach the point where we have suffered so much pain that we don't even know how to allow others in, we hear the name lonely. We hear the name unlovable. It was during this season of my life that I began experiencing sexual abuse by my stepfather, my mom's 5th husband. He would come into my room at night and use and abuse me, find his satisfaction, and then go and crawl back in bed with my mom. I was told that if I said anything to anyone, that I would ruin my mom's life and ruin her marriage. And after years of being told that I was the one that had broken up all of her relationships, I believed it. So I stayed quiet and I didn't tell anyone because my mom finally seemed happy and I didn't want to ruin that for her. So I just held my pain inside of me. I did try to reach out to people in our church. I didn't tell them what was actually going on, but I tried to kind of hint at things that were going on. I was told that I was making up stories and that I was lying because I was angry. They continued to look at my stepfather as this great guy who had rescued this single mom with 2 kids and was providing a great home for them, and I was just an angry teenager. That was the point when I was done with God. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with that God that would allow horrible, vile, awful things to happen, allow people to stay silent or to do nothing and allow it to happen. I think the church looks away in people's mess because it's scary. It's so much easier to look the other way than to get involved. I became real numb. I was obviously not worthy of love at all, and I didn't even know what love was at that point. Everything that this word love looked like was awful. Oh, if somebody had just believed me. If somebody had just believed me, it would have saved me from years of destruction. Not being believed was almost worse than the abuse.
When our innocence has been tainted by others or ripped away from us, and there is no one who will even listen, and we hear the name silenced.
This is the part that I have not wanted to talk about, but I need to. This is the part that the enemy has absolutely been using as an attack, that by sharing, everyone at church will see me differently. This is the part that's hard. He doesn't get to silence me. I was completely addicted to meth. My Christmas of 96, by January of 97, I was doing anything I could to get the drugs that I needed to support my addiction. And I was hopping from couch to couch and sometimes living in random people's basements or cars or wherever I could find shelter. And I began selling my body and trading my body for drugs. It sent me even deeper into the darkness. At that point, I just really didn't feel like there was anything left in me that was worthy of anything. Nobody wanted a drug-addicted kid, anywhere around them, and I felt just so unwanted and alone. So I climbed up onto the roof of our school, and that's where I lived for the next few months. I had no blanket. I had no anything to really keep me warm other than the giant heaters that were on the roof, the air HVAC systems, and they let off heat. And so I would huddle against them at night in the cold in Denver and march through May. Tried to hide myself away, but I didn't know where to go. So I stayed really close to the only place where I felt like I could go, which was school. I think the only thing that kept me walking back through the doors of school every day was the fact that I just didn't want to be alone. 4 days before graduation, I overdosed on a combination of LSD and meth. For 2 days, I sat on that roof and I waned in and out of consciousness. Had already tried to commit suicide 2 more times by this point. That's all I thought about all the time, was just dying. I knew that I was at a crossroads.
When we search for something, anything to ease our pain, and we pop a pill or take a drink, we hear the name addict. When we have desperately searched for love and to be loved, and we have given a piece of our souls away to the pleasures of the flesh, we hear the name dirty, we hear garbage. When we have been living in an endless sea of despair and chaos, when it feels like we're caught in a cycle of never-ending crisis, we hear the name forgotten.
As I was sitting there on that roof during those moments of consciousness, I remembered back to my early childhood when I had memorized scripture, and the one scripture that just kept playing over and over in my head was Psalms 23:4. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. It was at that moment was the first time that I had prayed, like really prayed. But it was not a prayer of surrender. It was not a prayer of asking for God to forgive me. It was a prayer challenge. Like, if you're real, show up. If you really are the God that everyone says you are, then you will do something to get me off of this roof. Do something to change my circumstances. And I was so angry as I prayed that prayer. I really didn't believe that it would make any difference. The next conscious moment that I had, my head was clear for the first time in years, and I finally felt sober, and it was almost unrecognizable because I hadn't felt it in so long. Later that day, what can only be explained as God showing up, he met my challenge. My mom's fourth husband just randomly showed up in Denver looking for me. He had heard that I had aged out of the foster care system and that I was living on the streets, and he wanted to help. I don't even know, but he showed up at my school and found me there and offered to take me home with him. He's the one person in my life that actually showed up to that point. So he gets the honor of being called Dad. When God shows up, it's really easy for us to take the credit. We're the ones in control. We're the ones who pulled ourselves up and changed our lives. It's only by God's grace that my addiction completely melted away. From that moment on that roof when I prayed till today, as I sit here, I have never touched another drug. I've never had the desire to touch another drug. The thought of it absolutely turns my stomach. It's his compassion for us in our brokenness that is speaking to us through his word. I really, really wish that I could say that this was the moment that I chose to believe in God. But it's really easy for us to ignore his presence.
When we have done so many things to hurt ourselves and to hurt others, when forgiveness feels unattainable and things that we have done are too bad to be worthy of grace, we hear the name ashamed.
When I met my husband, George, I finally felt like there was somebody who loved me, somebody who wanted me. And we had 3 kids within 3 years. It was really fast and really chaotic. He was just constantly deploying and leaving, and I began to believe that I was unwanted and that he was abandoning me, and just all of the things from my past just bubbled right back up to the surface. By the 4th or 5th deployment, I believed that George was choosing to leave me, that I was so undesirable that he literally had to fly halfway around the world to get away from me. 10 years into our marriage, I had made up my mind that I was done. I began my old habits of self-destruction. I started drinking in secret. I tried everything I possibly could to get George to leave me. Started looking for anyone to feel the emptiness that I was feeling. I turned to the arms of another man out of spite. You're gonna leave me? Well, watch this. You're gonna go on deployment? Watch what I'm gonna do. And it absolutely broke him.
I was angry. I was angry with kids. I was angry at everything. Didn't want to be in the same city with her.
We ended up separating.
Our friend invited me to church, to go Element Church. And I'm a Reformed Catholic, if you will. Sitting there, arms crossed, just like, whatever, dude, just hurry up, get out of here. And it felt like I was the only person he was talking to. And I'm like looking around going, I know there was more people in here than me.
He started going to Element, and he begged me to come with him for several weeks. I refused. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with it.
And it just hit me right there. Don't stop, keep going. You're supposed to be a man. This is what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to look like.
He just kept coming around, kept calling me, kept texting me.
God has a funny way of preparing you for the unknown. And I think he laid the groundwork of what was to come.
Never gave up on our marriage.
I got the book, and it's that 30-day love dare. Jeez. That was hard. I pursued her again, kept pursuing her, because that love dare is no joke. 30 days of loving the person that doesn't love you is hard.
I just started seeing changes in him. I didn't recognize who he was, and it was in a good way.
Without that godly man in her life, you're not, and she's not going to succeed. Nope, not going to be done. I'm not going to quit. I'm a soldier, I fight. I'm a soldier for my family, I'm going to fight.
Finally, I agreed. When I stepped through the doors of Element, I felt like everybody could see all of the awful things that I had done, that it was written all over my face. I had done way too many bad things in my life to even walk through the doors. I was greeted with compassion and with grace, and I was wanted there. Nobody condemned me. They just welcomed me and loved me. God began to heal small pieces of my brokenness. One Sunday I sat in service, and to this day I still don't know what the message was about. I just remember feeling like I was the only person in the room. At the end of that service, Jeff recited the salvation prayer. I silently spoke those words in my heart for the first time and really meant them. I really desperately wanted something different. And as I spoke those words, I barely believed them, but I didn't know what else to do. And there was nowhere else to turn. But in that moment of raising my hand, something inside of me broke. I finally let God in that moment. Years of shame and hurt and pain just poured from me. I wish I could say that it was an instant transformation. And I do believe that God can do that for some people, but that's just has not been my story. The past 12 years has been an up and down roller coaster of a ride, learning to trust, learning to heal, allowing God to heal me. But there is redemption and there is healing. And though I have struggled with depression and anxiety and suicide, through it all, God has been absolutely patient with me. And there's been so many times where I've just basically wanted to just spit in his face and turn the other way, but he has continued to pursue me and to have compassion for me. As I look back now, I'm actually pretty amazed by all of the names that I have believed about myself. When we have God's grace and we have his forgiveness, we no longer have to live under the weight of those old names. God does have a sense of humor. Despite all of the pain and all the things that I suffered as a child, God's led me to children's ministry, and he is able to use what has been broken inside of me and has been able to redeem that by allowing me to help other children. In eKids, it is my goal that every child that steps foot back there feels loved and knows that there are people who are going to accept them no matter what. And I never had that. I think that every child deserves that, but more than that, every child deserves to know the love of Jesus, and that's what I want to share. The biggest wall that I put between me and God was the inability to forgive myself. And until I was able to find forgiveness for myself, I was not able to let God fully in. You are not too dirty, too broken, too abused, too used for God to restore it. I learned to hear the voice of Jesus. He is so gentle and forgiving and understanding.
She needed a good dad in her life. She's had the earthly fathers, but her godly dad was what she really needed.
If you don't feel loved, he will love you. No matter who you are, what you've done, no matter what, you're loved.
I'm just in awe of what she's accomplished. I mean, she's going for her bachelor's, and it's a great thing to see someone come out from the ashes.
How alone I wasn't alone. No matter how forgotten I felt, I wasn't forgotten.
I sometimes feel like I feel I'm her second, she's in command and I'm just kind of following. She just grew so fast. I mean, she leaps and bounds. Honestly, she's my superhero.
Been going through this entire experience, I've really been able to see how God has always been there.
It happens in everybody's life that you put your faith in Jesus. You put that trust, obedience to him, and it works. It works every day of the week, twice on Sundays.
The love that I have been seeking my entire life, I have found in the arms of Jesus.
God has given us a book filled with the names that he has given us, that he has named us. He calls us friend. He calls us chosen. He calls us his masterpiece. He calls us wonderfully made, purposed, and made in his image. Through this journey of healing, this journey to discover who I really am, I have learned that my name is not the name that the world gives me. We have a new name. we are redeemed.